Abhishek, Russia has the second largest army in the world. It's only next to the United States of America. In the morning we were talking about the fact that when a flashpoint like this is there, where 130,000 of Russian troops are on the ground, could it perhaps escalate faster than anybody could predict?
It sure can. Nupur, it sure can. The mobilization is not without showing the possibility of those actions being taken. Remember, the whole idea of brinkmanship is to make the mobilization look real. And in that context, as I was mentioning earlier, the mobilization is there on the other side also, of course, not to the scale that the Russians have done. Russians have a point to make, and that is that NATO has lost its relevance post the dismantling of the USSR. The whole idea of NATO not just continuing but then expanding towards East is seen as a threat to Russian security interests in the region. And that's why Russia sees this as its sphere of influence, area of influence where NATO shouldn't be meddling. Americans, of course, believe that for democracy's sake and for the security interests of Western Europe, NATO needs to remain not just in its present form but expand wherever it can. It has been expanding as late as 2020. So I think this is going to go on some trigger on the ground. Perhaps situation could go out of hand. Also remember, a lot of posturing when it happens. Pullback becomes difficult unless concessions happen. So if the concessions happen, maybe pullback could happen. Otherwise, a situation might emerge where we could be looking at possibility of a war. So far as West is concerned, they have said that they would first deal with the Russian invasion by way of sanctions. But then there is an escalatory matrix already in place, which is generally in place when two opposite sides come together face to face in this kind of situation. So I think all sides are trying not to go that ladder, but then the mobilization of forces, the mobilization of missile batteries, so for example, all the ammunition and war machinery that has come to Ukrainian side also clearly indicates that both sides are in a way preparing for that eventuality just in case someone pulls the trigger.
All right, let's go back to Tushar and Vinay. Now, Tushar, I understand you're studying in Ukraine, and as you yourself mentioned, there are a large number of medicine students, who study in Russia as well as Eastern Europe. You are, of course, in touch with a large number of Ukrainian citizens, and we were talking about the fact how for the past 8 years, they have seen some sort of conflict at least. So, among the local population, is there panic? Do you see a large number of other nationalities actually go out of the porous borders? Are you seeing that already happening?
Actually, if we meet the Ukrainian people, it is like normal. They are walking around normally. I don't know why they are not panicking about it. Maybe they are used to this situation about that Russia will invade. Yes, Russia will invade, but it will never invade. Like, I don't know exactly what is going in their mind. But it is, if we go outside, it just look like normal. Everything is normal. It just seems like there is no war going on. It is nothing. But when we come to Indian community, Indian students, other students from other countries, but it is like very panic situation in everyone's mind, because there is no official information from the Indian embassy. If we have to leave Ukraine, we have to stay in here. If the war will go on, or if the war will not go on. And what will happen if the war goes, and will the Indian embassy evacuate us, and how will they evacuate us in a short period of time, like 1 to 2 days? Like, there are more than 20,000 students in whole Ukraine. So how will the Indian government will manage to evacuate all the students in one moment, in like 2 to 3 days, if the war happens?
All right, one final question from Vinay before we thank the two of you. Vinay, are you seeing a shortage of food? Are you seeing a shortage of fuel? Are you seeing shortages, or is that something that's not hit the country yet?
There is no panic buying right now. Everything seems to be pretty normal. But you can go to supermarket, the food availability is okay, and everything seems to be fine on this issue, but it might get crucial when anything happens, like if Russia decides to invade the Ukraine. First thing, human instinct kicks in, and everyone is going to run to the stores, the supermarket, buying food and storing up food for their, who knows how long this thing will go. Because if only Russia and Ukraine goes to war, it might end up in 72 hours, 48 to 72 hours. But if NATO comes in and decide to join fight, it might elongate and situation get worse.
All right. Tushar and Vinay, stay with us. We're going to come back to you in just a bit. But if I could bring in Abhishek now. Abhishek, you know, this is a concern for Indian students. By certain estimates seem to suggest there are about 20,000 students in Ukraine. So what is the sense that you're getting from New Delhi at this point in time? Are we prepared to evacuate our students if there's an emergency? And largely also, what is India's position as far as this conflict goes?
Well, Nupur, to answer your last question first, so if there is an emergency situation where a war happens, then of course evacuations would need to be carried out and there would be preparations for that. But then I was listening to the concerns raised by the students because about a dozen odd countries have issued advisories and sort of part evacuated their citizens or asked them to leave on their own volition. The Indian position is that the situation perhaps on the ground does not warrant any alarm. Or raising an alarm. Flights are on. These students, if they are listening, if they want to leave on their own volition, they can take those flights and get out of Ukraine if they get a sense that the situation is really bad. Remember, when a vote happened in the United Nations about a fortnight back, India abstained from it, and the position that India took, which was reiterated by our External Affairs Minister yesterday at the Quad press conference, was that the situation, the evolving situation, has to take into account security concerns of all the sides. Now that's a nuanced position, but essentially says that as much as Ukrainians have their concerns about a Russian invasion, Russia's security interest vis-a-vis NATO should also be taken care of. So I think that is the reason why perhaps no advisory has been issued insofar as asking Indian citizens there in Ukraine for them to leave. But then as I said, if it comes to that and if a war breaks out, then obviously an evacuation plan would be in place.
Absolutely, and as you're pointing out, of course, we do have friends across the divide. Both India and Russia, as well as India and the US, do have a good relationship. For the moment, Tushar and Vinay, thank you for joining us from Ukraine.